the best intro ever.
The
Because
funniest thing is I can
the
see you.
double bass that kicks in like right
We
as your picture comes
and
up.
it's funny because we say it every single time because you see me grooving to it, I see you grooving to it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. All right. Well, we're back this week. We were off last week because of me. Because well, it was 1 degree here, and for Oklahoma, that's really cold. So I wasn't. I was had a headache from that, and then my kids were also home from school. So you can imagine the headache I had. So, but we're back this week.
Blame the
They
children.
were home. I didn't tell you this. They were home Monday because of President's Day. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Thursday, it was 30 degrees outside, and they were still home
Why?
because it was cold in the morning.
Oh,
So they canceled school because it was like 8 degrees in the morning.
seriously?
Yeah, yeah. Dude, these Okies, man,
You're supposed to
they
be
ain't
like
built.
a hardcore deep red state, and then you got a bunch of softies.
Yeah, they ain't built for the
That's
cold,
just
man. I tell
soft.
you what. Yeah, there was like I could understand Tuesday and Wednesday because there was ice and snow on the road,
Well,
but
yeah.
Thursday made no sense. I was like, "What? You got to be
Do
kidding me!" Like everybody was
kids
off.
can wear jackets? It turns out.
Yeah, my kids have really big jackets and gloves and hats and coats, but
A weak
it was
generation.
cool. Yeah, it was like, what the hell?
This month has been super cold in Colorado. Like there's days it was like negative 15, negative 10. I mean
Yeah,
that's like the
yeah,
low, but there was days it got up to like. Well, I went to work the other day. It was like -6.
yeah, yeah.
I couldn't just
It's,
call in and say, "Oh, it's so cold. I can't make it in." No,
right,
can't do
right,
that.
yeah. Like, yeah,
And my
every
processor
school.
probably would have laughed at me, like, "Shut the hell up, just get
Yeah, get
in."
in. Like every school, and then like the next day, Friday, it was like above freezing, and like all the rec centers were still closed.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, damn, you guys are. And now, so it was like that last Tuesday. Now here it was 80 degrees today. So you never know what's going on.
That sounds
It's
about right.
Oklahoma. It's Oklahoma. So all right, well, we're going to talk about what are we talking about today? We're talking about why people turn their backs on God, not the other way around. A lot of people like to have you think that God turns his back on you, which is completely not true. Um,
We both have a blood relative that has claimed that God did that.
yeah, well, yeah. She also thinks Kamala was a good choice for president. I mean, yeah, I don't put too much stock into that one.
Like, they're being mean. The Christians are being mean. It's a joke.
Yeah,
Well,
right, right.
yeah, I
Not
mean,
really.
yes.
Not really. So, so why? I mean, I have my own opinions for this that I'll share in a minute. But what do you think the number one reason is that people would turn their back on God?
There's two answers that I think are a dead heat, but ultimately one of them is used as the excuse when in actuality it's the other one. And so the other one would be the answer. So the other one would be um, their opinions. They can't get past their own opinions, and they don't want to agree that said thing is wrong. That God, whatever it may be, whatever sin God says is wrong. They can't get past that, and they want their opinion say, "Well, that's right. Forget it," and they shut the whole thing down.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that. I still know people that do that, and that can kind of go hand in hand with something where like they don't get their way on something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a big one that I've not really encountered personally with people, but I've heard of a lot is like when, say, their mother dies or their husband dies or their child dies, and so they abandon
Right.
God. Well,
Right.
that's we all, and no one's going to sit here and say, "Oh, any of that's easy." Like you've had people pass away. We have the same relatives that have passed away. All of our grandparents have passed away. As an
Yep.
example,
Yep.
um, our Aunt Mary Jo passed away. I mean, we were real little. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that have passed away, but the question becomes is like, who told these people that wouldn't happen?
Well, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like who told you that? And it's because it's like, well, because it's unexpected. Well, most deaths are unexpected, right? Like you're like,
yeah, majority.
yeah, and so it's like it's like a lot of people I think cling to these. I don't want to say false promises because no one promised it to begin with, but like these false ideas that certain things in life were going to be a certain way and they just aren't. Even something like, oh, I can't believe my relative passed away. Well, what do you mean you can't believe that? Of course, we all pass away at some point.
Right.
But I think people's opinions, I think that's one of the main contributors to people turning from God. And the argument can always be made. It's like, well, were they really with God to begin with? And honestly, no.
No.
That's the general consensus. It's like the argument where, well, can you lose salvation? Well, no. And the Christians that have fallen away, it's like, well, they never really accepted to begin with, and because it's like, or they read something about, I can't believe God would destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, for example. Well, A, we don't make the rules. A, God can kill what he creates. He's the creator. He runs the show whether we like it or not. He warned those people repeatedly. Just things like that. It's just if it's not knowing God's character, I think ultimately too, when you don't know God's character and understand the context of everything and not just cherry pick verses here and there. Another example I think would be like, well, God lets Satan do all these things and tempt us, and it's like, well, yes, Satan can't do anything unless God gives him permission. But if God lets Satan tempt me all day long, does that maybe suck for me in the temporary? Yes. But if I know God, I know that that is temporary, and that he also says that we are given the ability to trample on snakes and scorpions, and that he will also give us a way out of every temptation, no matter how bad it is. And so to me, in my mind, it's like, well, what does it matter if he's allowing Satan to tempt me? Then it's just going to make me better at the end of the day. And it does every time.
Right.
You come out on top of it and you lean into your faith. You lean on God. Well, why would God test us? Well, that's why, because it builds character. Apostle Paul talks about this. So, again, I think ultimately lack of understanding, and people want their own opinions to where they can say, oh, well, I don't like that thing that God said, so forget it.
Yeah. So I got a couple different ones for you. The ones that I hear the most, like whenever I talk to somebody who's a non-believer, it always seems like these two things are the reasons why. They start out that way, and organized religion takes them away from it, pushes them away from it. So
that was my other one I was going to say.
Yeah, I figured it was. I've talked to countless people where it's the same thing. People that have gone completely non-belief in God, people that have gone agnostic, people that have just said kind of the hell with it. So I will say that's probably the first one. And the funny thing about that is that, again, we've talked about this on the show before. Religion's man-made. It's not made by God. It's taking a piece of the Bible that you feel you need to focus on the most, and using that to base your entire talks, all your sermons about. For me, that's not a good idea, because we have an entire Bible that you could be talking about instead of just one book or one verse or whatever it might be. Also, there's religion's not for everybody. Obviously, there's a lot of rules that we'll use. Since you and I have the most experience in this, we'll use Catholicism as the number one thing. I'll give you some of the reasons, and these would be my reasons, because I left Catholicism. Now, I didn't turn my back on God. I turned my back on the Catholics is what I did. So first and foremost, why on earth we're calling a priest father is beyond me. There's one Father and one Father only, and that's God.
Right.
So it's blasphemous to me to call the priest father.
Right.
and it's walking on that kind of high and mighty.
So it's elevating him.
Right, which is
Yeah.
exactly what we shouldn't be. And then also their leader is a clown. The Pope is a clown. I'm sorry, I'm gonna just say it. He's
Hey,
a
His
clown.
Holiness, how dare you?
His Holiness, yeah, okay. We've talked about him on this show too, and the stuff he said, the stuff he's done, where he said any religion will get you to heaven in any way you
Right.
believe, and I can be an Islamic follower that follows the Quran that says kill all the Catholics and still get to heaven. That kind of stuff, and
But
it's
if
like.
you're a good person, whatever
Right,
that is.
right, yeah. The good person gets you there.
Yeah,
So
I don't know what that is still, but
that's a big problem. Also, confessing your sins to the priest as well. I got a big problem with because, again, he has no power to forgive those sins. They criticize. What's funny about the Catholics is the Jews criticized Jesus for forgiving sins and called that blasphemous and called him a false prophet. Yet the Catholics base their entire religion on the priest being able to forgive sins and doing the exact same thing that Jesus does himself. So,
man, that's actually pretty good. I never actually thought I never
yeah,
connected that. That's
right.
really good, actually.
It's like blasphemous as hell, right?
Well,
So
it's you'll think
ridiculous.
about that for a second though, because the Jews because Christ is God in the flesh, they downgraded who Christ was, but then you have the
Right.
Catholics elevating who
Upgrade.
the priest is,
Right.
and they're going in
Right.
opposites
Right.
where they shouldn't be going. The opposite should be true. We should elevate Christ,
Right.
and all people should not be. No person should be elevated.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
really good.
Yeah.
But
So,
that's a huge flaw within the Catholic religion. I had
well,
never
those two things right there
connected.
are my biggest. Forget my own
Yeah.
personal experience. That's just Catholicism as a whole. Those are my two probably the biggest things. And I don't agree with the way they go about things. I don't agree with. I won't go bore you all with all the things I disagree. There's a lot. I won't go over them all. But I think religion and not just Catholicism. There's all kinds. There's Baptists, the Methodists. Geez, no wonder people leave the church for Methodists the way they act. Lots of things. When somebody starts out going to a church, say they're Methodist, and they're long timers, and then all of a sudden they see rainbow flags out in front of a Methodist church that says "All's welcome." Man, I'd be running too. I want to turn.
The
I want to turn
Episcopal
my
Church does
back
that as
on
well.
God. What's that?
Right. The Episcopals are really huge on that
Yes,
lately.
yes. And I think what people do, so like the
They
last person I talked to about this, I won't talk about who it is because I don't talk to this person anymore. But he said it was just solely the church and the way the church works. So he figured that okay, so I shouldn't just go, non-denominational or something. I should ban the entire church. I should turn my back on God as a whole. Well, you're turning your
That's
back
usually
on
what they do.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
turning your back on God for something he didn't make or didn't do. And
That's
that's
a
what
whack. So
you got to
like,
understand.
yeah. Well, what that is in the Bible when God says, "My people will perish due to lack of knowledge." Lack of knowledge, lack of understanding,
Mhm.
ignorance, in other words. So
Right,
that was an act of ignorance because that's not knowing what you're talking about. That's not
right,
knowing God. And one of the main things, and I was talking to my friend Jeff about this today a little bit. The way that people are, whether it be like they even go to a really false church, like say they go to see Kenneth Copeland or Jesse Duplantis or Stephen Furtick, one of these guys, or one of these churches that are a man-made religion, like you're talking about. They don't ever read their Bible. They don't know what God really says, and they're just
right,
taking this guy or this religion's
right.
word for it. And then something spirals the wrong way, and then, like you just said, they get upset or offended or hurt, like any of us could,
Yep,
and
yep,
they
yep.
shut the door on the whole thing without actually knowing what they're shutting the door on. They should be shutting the door on those false preachers, those wolves in sheep's clothing, those false religions, those man-made things. But like you just said, they cast that broad net and the blanket statement and just shut down everything.
Right.
It's like they're shutting down God's word, which most in all likelihood they don't know much about,
Exactly.
which is the
That's
problem.
why rule number one: if you go to a church, if they don't quote scripture, run, leave, get out of there.
Correct.
Because if they don't quote scripture, it's just opinion based from there. They have no facts to go off of and no facts to refer back to. I could say that God told me to go buy a Toyota Prius. If I can't back that up with some kind of scripture, it's my opinion and I'm lying to you. I mean,
Well,
seriously.
right, and yeah, that's the other thing is some churches, a lot of Catholic churches, for example, not all of them, but a lot of them can. There's just the idea of doom and gloom, like the priest can be up there and everything is you're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell, and pushing guilt on you.
Right.
But God Himself never really pushes guilt on people, right? There's something called conviction, which is different than guilt. But then you have the other churches where, like Stephen Furtick is one of the worst at this, where he carefully and meticulously, and Kenneth Copeland and Joel Osteen's a big one.
Oof.
They
The
will
Joker.
never talk about sin. They will never even use the word, and they do it on purpose because it's everything's like what Joel Osteen does. It's a tactic where it's just like he's always talking about the people that hurt you, the others that hurt you, or the ones that sinned against you, or whatever he wants to say. And talking to his congregation. So he's never talking to his congregation like they did something wrong. It's always everyone
Everybody
outside
else.
the
Yep.
church.
It's
So
victim mentality.
right. So those people are never being said, where is you? They're never being told, well, where's your heart at? It's, oh, the bad hearts of everyone else picking on you, basically. It's like, you need a church that has a balance.
Yep.
It's grace. But yes, we do need conviction. We do need to be reminded of what is sin and what is not. But we're also reminded of God's forgiveness, His mercy. But God, there are things that He hates too. Like there has to be that balance. It just has to be the truth, not, oh well, we don't say this because we want to get more people into the church, and that means more donations and things like that. And it's like there's very, very, very few churches that are just biblically based in truth, and Pastor Mark's one of them where, well, if they leave, they leave. If they come in, they come in.
Yeah.
It's my duty to tell the truth. So,
Yep.
I'll
say the second one that I hear the most too is an over religious parent.
yes.
So, you have a dad or a mom that's super hardcore. We'll use Catholicism again since we're going on that one. Super hardcore Catholic. They follow every single rule and they beat it into their kid without any mercy or grace or anything like that. That one, again, I think that one's probably a little. I mean, none of them are really understandable, but if I was going to understand one over the other, I would understand the second one with the overbearing parents because you grew up with that. You don't really know any better. If you grew up with that kind of thing and they drive you away, we'll use the celebrity as an example. We'll take Madonna. Madonna's father was a very hardcore, I think he was Catholic. I don't know for sure.
I believe
But
so.
but it drove her he was so hard with it and stuff, it drove her to be one of the nastiest human beings walking this planet now. And the things she's done, the things she said, she's basically part of the Illuminati and all that stuff. So what it's done is it's had the complete reverse effect. Everything that he wanted her to do by preaching God and Catholicism and everything else, it had the reverse effect, drove her away even further. And she's like, I don't want no part of this because she associates that with past childhood trauma and everything else. She's like, I don't want no part of it, and I don't want to hear it. And that's the problem with that is they shut the door completely.
Right.
With somebody who's when somebody who's had a bad experience with their church, you can say, okay, you could talk to them at least and say, that's the church. Let me point out what you're seeing at the church and show what God really says, what God really shows. And you can probably talk to them. But when you have somebody that was ingrained with it from basically birth, that's when it gets hard.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Well, because ideally, your parents should be the ones that are the most trustworthy and
right.
Your best relationships that you have, and they should be because I don't know her upbringing really, but a lot of the old school was like it's just guilt and shame.
Yep.
It's never there's no grace, right? And so when it's just guilt and shame, people are going to think, well, that's all God is about. That's the God they talk about is just guilt and shame and how I'm horrible and I'm going to hell and this and that and I can't do anything right. It's like, well, in a biblical sense, no, that's not what God says at all.
Right.
But again, like you said, if it's your parents saying this, that has so much more of an impact than, like you just said, if you walk into some church and some guy says something, it's like, okay. But yeah, and then they end up rebelling against their parents, and then rebelling against God, or the version of God that the parent told them.
Right.
That's the other thing. Unfortunately, God gets blamed for things that people do, or Satan
All the
does
time. All the time.
all the time.
God's the ultimate scapegoat when it comes to bad
Yes.
things. You hear people say, "Why do bad things happen to me?" Well, here's the thing: God will test you. God will put you in seasons. God will lay things in front of you that He wants to test you with to see if you could overcome. God is not a kid with a magnifying glass, and you're the ant trying to burn you up. That's
Right.
not the way it works.
Right.
Every single person on this planet is going to deal with hard times, going to deal with seasons, going to deal with tests put in front of them. If you think that you're exempt from that, well, sorry, Buttercup, you're not, because that's everybody. Now, will some people have greater tests than other people? Yeah, there's some people that lose children at a young age. There's
Mhm.
some people that have disease, they have this, they have that, whatever it might be. And then there's some people who go their life with, hardly being sick. Their kids grow up great, blah, blah, blah. All that is, it's just the way it is. But I will tell you, I was listening to a podcast the other day where it was actually at this new church I'm going to. So I'm going to a new church because we'll get into the reason. I'll get into the reason I'm not going to my old church here in a minute. But the new church, the pastor was talking to one of the youth pastors, and one of the youth pastors was came up from a family of drugs and this and that, and she's like, well, with that, the devil was always on us, so we always had it easy. We weren't, there was the drugs and stuff, but they never really had like any death in the family or any challenges. And she told the pastor, she's like, well, when I went to Christianity, I thought, well, you guys got it easy. You guys have it real easy because you're Christians and
See,
God's on your side and everything else. And she's like, man, it took me about 2 minutes to realize that being a Christian's way harder than not being one.
way
Because
harder.
now all of a sudden I went from no rules, drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be, to all these rules now. And it's like, that's the misconception too, is that, anytime anybody's got a problem politically or whatever, oh, well, you're a Christian, it's easy for you. You should be able to understand my point of view. Where you're a Christian, you need to be bigger and badder about this. And it's like, you don't understand, being a Christian is like one of the hardest things to do.
Oh, hands down. Because at that point, like the devil's not after who he has. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Right.
he's after who he doesn't have. And um, look at the Christians in the New Testament, all the apostles, just the stuff that Apostle Paul went through. None of the apostles died in nice ways. None of them.
Yeah.
Gosh, you look at who else can we say? Um, John the Baptist. The way he died, he was in jail, and then I forget her name, but she called what she wanted one thing, and it was his head on a platter. So
Yep. So I did it.
She got what she asked for.
Yep.
The ultimate example, though, and this is where what people really fail to realize is when people get mad at God, they forget that God sent His only Son. So God in the flesh would be Christ. What am I trying to say? So, the Trinity, the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. So then the Son, which would be Jesus, God in the flesh, fully man, fully God, he had the worst death of any human being ever, past, present, and future, and was completely betrayed by virtually almost not everybody, but most people. And they literally, they massacred him. And he went through the most amount of suffering. He died at a young age. He was about 33 years old.
Yep.
He was completely innocent, completely sin-free, and all the things they did to him, and they kill him and everything. No one sits and says, "Well, why would God? Oh, how come God's doing this, doing that?" Like to Jesus. But if they have a little thing happen to them, then it's a deal breaker. It's like, well, it's not like God's not the boss that says, "Hey, go clean those toilets," but He's not about to clean the toilet himself. You know what I mean?
Right.
God He'll tell us to do things, but He's put himself in there as well. He's in the game as well. He's done more than any of us has ever done, and taken more suffering and pain and betrayal than and rejection than any of us have ever taken or ever will take. We can't fathom how bad that must have been for Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's just we can make ourselves victims very quickly.
Well, and that's the number one cause of it is the victim mentality. Like we said before, it's like, you know, whenever you talk to somebody like that, be like, well, you don't know what I've been through. Be like, try me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's
You know,
no like levels to that. It's like God says in this life there will be suffering, there will be trials,
right,
there will be hardship, there will
right.
be death. You know, we are in a essentially world of anarchy, more or less. And it's a fallen world, and it's a broken world, and it's a dying world. And God lays all these things out. It's like He's told you everything already that will happen in life, but yet we get offended.
Yeah.
Even though it's like, would it be better that He just didn't tell you? Would He just like, I'm not going to tell anyone anything?
Surprise!
Like, it's pretty generous if you ask me. Yeah,
Right.
surprise.
Surprise, surprise. You got cancer. Surprise.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that. But what it ends up being is it's again me. You know, why is God after me?
Pride.
Why do I that's what it is. Exactly. You beat me to it. Yes, it's pride.
Sorry.
And that's where the devil comes in, because he's not about to tell you anything. He's going to question you. Be like, well, why is God picking on you? Why does God want to do this to you? You know, it's what we said before, where it's not going to be so much accusations. It's going to be questions and putting the doubt into you. And I think that's where the doubt comes from. Now, I think it's very foolish if you've had like one bad experience with a church, and I'll go back to what I said before. I'll use my church as an example. My old church, me and my family, we've stopped going there for a few weeks now. It's very clicky. It's very high schoolish. It's very, you know, there's a lot of younger people like in their 30s and 40s that go there, and you can tell it's got that kind of vibe and that air to it where it's like, okay. And the way I see it is, it's like it's almost like a status of, okay, well, these people make this much money, so they're in this group, and these people make this money, so they're in this group. And what it does is that's the devil's other way of trying to take my mind off of what the word is and what's being spoken in the sermon, and focus it on to, well, these people are jerks and I don't really want to be around these people. And I'll tell you what, for a little bit, it's actually worked, because I get myself to where I'm like, you know, I do like the message, but I don't see the pastor always living the message that he's conveying. You know what I mean? Saying, oh, well, we need to, you know, it's not about numbers, and it's not about money. Okay, here's the deal. Yeah, newsflash. If you're a pastor, it's always about the numbers and about the money, because that's how your church goes round and round. Now, do you have to make that priority one? No, of course not. Of course not. But it's always going to be a little bit about that, because that's how you keep the church going, and that's how things go. So, from what I've seen, it's just kind of one of those things where, you know, you say to yourself, how much of this can I take before I reach my breaking point? It's like we've kind of got there to where we reached our breaking point, and now it's like, okay, go look at something else. We've been trying another church now that's got a lot of old people in it. Well, everyone's very nice. It's not as clicky. You know?
The older generation really is not as
Right.
clicky.
It is. It's a generational thing too. But the funny thing is, the church we've been going to now, much bigger. It's one of the mega churches that you'll see in Oklahoma and see in Texas, and it's just got a more, as big as it is. You know, if you guys have ever been to a mega church, they're huge. I mean, it's like an auditorium, you know, like a stadium kind of thing. But people have been more welcoming there in the 2 or 3 weeks we've gone than people had been in the previous church. So the point is, an important to make, I didn't turn my back on God because I'm having not the best experience at the old church. I decided, well, this is human run. This is humans that are doing this. I'm going to go to another church with other humans and see if it fits a little bit better. I didn't turn my back on God and say, oh, well, this one church sucks. Forget you, God. You know, I mean, this is where people need to kind of get a grip and say, okay, well, if it doesn't work, then let's try something else. It's like if you buy an SUV, oh, I don't like this SUV, and then you go buy a sports car. Oh, I like this sports car. It doesn't
Right.
mean you stop driving completely.
I've given up on
Right.
anti-car.
No cars ever again.
Anything with
I'm going to
wheels.
ride. I'm going to ride a moped. So
Well,
that's the point I'm trying to make. Is like
yeah.
you have to have the discernment to know. Okay, it's not the church might not be a good fit. That's fine. They might
There's more bad churches
there are
than
more bad churches than good churches. Right.
well, exactly. And God is not responsible for how people act.
Mm-mm.
People are responsible for how they act as individuals, meaning the individual
Right.
you're never responsible for how I act and vice versa. The only person responsible for how I act or how you act. How I act is me, how you act is you. Only you can control that. And God also gives a thing that is called free will.
Right.
So if a self-proclaimed Christian or whoever is being nasty and horrible and treating people terribly, yeah, he's projected himself as a representative of God, but God's not responsible for how he's acting. So if he's doing it wrong, it's or she, it's on them.
Mm-hmm.
And people need to, like you said, discernment. That's another thing. It's like, well, I can tell that this person's not acting godly. I mean, no one's perfect, of course, but if you can't even treat people right within a church building, and it's very evident that there's cliques and that there's favoritism. Um, that's yeah, that can put a sour taste in your mouth, but that's not God's fault. That's those
Right.
people. They've made those decisions.
Yeah.
It's not God's fault that I'm a moron at times and I do stupid things and I say stupid things or have sins in my life. It's like he's told me repeatedly not to do those things.
Well.
But he doesn't take that choice away. He doesn't take that free will away. Neither
Yeah.
does Satan, for that matter. And a lot of people only want their free will when it's convenient to them.
Well, of course, yeah.
It's, hey, I should be able to work with the federal government and not actually have to do anything and take all that money. Oh, you're going to take away, you don't want me to have an abortion? That's my choice. You see what I mean? Like, it's the all you can eat buffet, as me and mom and dad talk about. When you go through the all you can eat buffet, you're just taking, I want Jello, I want, I want chicken. Oh, I don't want the turkey. I don't want the broccoli. Like, you're only just taking what you want here and there. And ultimately that's the problem.
Yeah.
So,
well, and if you can't realize that or can't see that, that is where God also calls us to. This is a big thing too, that a lot of people have mixed opinions on and mixed feelings. A lot of people will get mad at you for doing this. A lot of people will get mad at you for not doing this. But if you see someone like that, you need to kind of call them out a little bit. You need
for Christian to Christian, you have a lot of leeway there.
Exactly.
You do it as the Bible says, in a gentle manner, but
right.
The truth can be shared gently. It's not that difficult.
Right. So, it's like if you see something like that and you see someone turning away and they're not there yet, it is better to go to them and say, hey, you know what, you need to think about this and this and that and that. Because I've had conversations like that where people are like, well, I'm about done with this. And I'm like, well, hold on a sec. All of your problems are with people. You haven't named one single problem that God has put in front of you. Has God put the people in front of you? Yes. Is that for a reason? Probably. If it's something that's on your mind and something that's pulling you away from where you're at, it's probably a test, or it's something that you just need to get away from. It's like there are certain things, like certain sins where God says, run away. It's like sexual sin. What does God say? God says, run away from it. Don't try to fight it. Don't do anything. The best thing is run away. Take all the pictures and all the stuff. Don't look at it. Then you won't be tempted in that direction, and then you won't have the problem, right? You can't fight it. That's another good thing that this new church preaches that I'm going to, that a lot of other churches, I haven't heard this, to where it's like, okay, you're going to make mistakes. It's the flesh. The flesh is the flesh. And a lot of what
the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Right. And a lot of it is you're not going to beat it. It's only through Jesus and through God's grace that you're going to be what you want to be. You
Right.
as a whole by yourself, you're
We
overmatched. You can't do it. It's not
right.
possible. So when people, and I do this all the time too, people say, "Oh, I'm going to change. I'm going to make it." Well, first of all, if you have a problem like that, it's a habit that you've been doing for years and years and years and years. You think that one day you're just going to flip the little switch and it's going to stop? No, it's not. You have to have God's help and God on your side to do that because your flesh is weak. You're never going to be able to get through it on your own by yourself. A lot of people will say, go talk to a counselor. That's good and stuff. But again, you're only using the human aspect of it. You're not using
Right.
Jesus and God and bringing them into the equation. So even if you did that, you're still going to fail because you're not getting the right help. You're not doing what they call what the Catholics or what not the Catholics, geez, what the Christians say, give it to God. When we have something on our mind, we're supposed to give it to God. We're supposed to say, God, this is, and that could be hard. A lot of people have a misunderstanding about that. You know,
Oh, for sure. Well, it's like the idea of taking every thought captive. Like a first thought that comes into your mind isn't your fault. A second and third and fourth and 10th and all that, dwelling on the original thought, all that
right,
is your fault. So,
right, right.
um, yeah.
Yeah.
But
What other ways do you think that people would turn their back on God?
yeah, I think just hardship in general, probably. I mean, um, well,
Because I've heard it.
I
I've
would
heard of.
honestly, I would say false idols. I guess now that I
Yeah,
think about it.
that's a good one. Yep.
What I would say about that, we'll use politics. That's the greatest example as far as I can tell. It's like when you have and obviously if you're talking political parties, neither one is perfect, of course, and neither of them should be what your faith is based in, of course. But I once knew a guy, for example, many years ago that he was very left leaning, and he explained to me, he's like, if the Bible was more in line with the leftist views, then I would still be a Christian. And I'm like, well,
You better go to the Church of
those
Satan if you
are
want that.
well, right. I mean, that's a at the end of the day, those are a lot of man-made those are man-made ideologies. Now, the conservative right has much more of the view rooted in biblical principle, and that's why generally Christians would more gravitate that way. It's not saying it's perfect, um, but so by idol I mean like they're putting the political views above the biblical. They're
Mhm.
putting that above God. They're putting that above, in many cases, everything else, even people.
Yes.
But when, and again, that goes back into what I said earlier, like their own opinions, where their heart's out on it. They want this so much that they don't care what God says. They bat it out of the way, and ultimately, um, those things obviously clash. Like when a lot of the far left views clash with Christianity, they clash with Judaism.
Mhm.
Um, and so the biggest mistake that a lot of Christians make is that they want to have God at this certain time for this certain thing for a certain reason, as opposed to having God at the center of everything all the time in all circumstances for everything for every reason. So meaning like they always talk about like the Sunday Catholic, they always make that joke like, oh,
Yeah.
it's Sunday, I gotta go to church, I gotta do these deeds, these good
Yeah.
deeds. And then as soon as they get out of church, like they're flipping each other off in the parking
Cut
lot kind of
people
thing.
off. Yeah.
Yeah. like so people don't you when you vote, for example, you need to vote to the candidate that not that goes with the political ideology that you think is the most important thing, but it needs to go with what is the closest to the biblical ideology.
Right.
And if you meet a new person, you need to treat them how God asks you to, not how you think, how you want to, or how your mood is, or how your feelings are that day.
Yeah.
Um, or if you're working a job, it's not just business. Like your Christianity has to be in what you do and say at the job. It's not just, oh, I work my job. It's a different set of rules and philosophy, but then I'm a Christian when I'm outside of my work. That's where people make the mistake. The Christianity and the having Christ as your foundation has to be in all aspects of your life, all of them, especially how you treat people, especially how you conduct yourself. Like you said, Brian, about like trying to find the right vehicle. It's like God may not tell you, hey, you need to get this vehicle specifically, but you can say, Lord, you can get guidance from God on anything.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the biggest problems is people want to have these contradicting ideologies all at once. And they cherry pick or this the all you can eat buffet on some of the Christian principles, but then in the same breath they're over here being things like pro-abortion and they're fine with young kids wanting to be trans and taking them to these doctors and literally have them mutilated. It's like, well, these are massive like contradictions. And a lot of people can take that out of context and say, well, so Christians have to be perfect. No, not at all. But like you said, you make mistakes, you slip up. But man, those are huge. And then you're voting for someone that, say at a rally says, oh, if you're at the wrong rally for the people yelling that Jesus is Lord. I mean, how are you going to, in one breath, say you're a Christian, but then you're going to vote for the person that tells people that yell Jesus is Lord that they're at the wrong political rally? Yeah. As an example, politics are the best example because that's what you call double-mindedness. In one breath, they're, oh, I'm a Christian, but then the next breath, they're voting for someone like that and engaging in things like that. It's like, well, and it's not a mistake. Like, it's a mindset. It's where their heart is. That's not a mistake. That's how they live their life. That's a path they've chosen. Like, that's very different than, you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off and you yell a curse word and then you're like, ooh, I shouldn't have said that.
Right.
Those are different things, whether people want to accept that or not.
Yeah.
Both bad, but
I think politics is a religion for both sides for certain people.
It can be. It can be.
It can be as much as a religion for the left as it is, or for the right as it is for the left. There are people that are super, super ultra MAGA that think that Trump is God himself.
The second coming of Christ.
Second coming of Christ himself.
Right.
Obviously, there's a lot of people who also base an entire religion on hating Trump. So it's like, it's both ways. It's both ways.
It is.
And that, we talked about this with when it was voting season. The best way to vote is vote your values. If you have no values, vote Democrat because they don't have any values. They'll say they do, but they don't. Ultimately, they're trying to, and I don't want to make this a political thing, but who cares? They're trying to stop someone from cutting wasteful spending. They're trying to stop someone from getting rid of the dead weight that's been milking us. You all forget. Where do you think those federal employees, those DEI employees, those US aid employees, where do you think their salary comes from?
It's all tax money. The government doesn't
tax money. You're paying for those lazy asses.
Well, it's not that big a deal. It's only put us $36 trillion in debt.
Right. So that's the thing. But
well, they're anti-accountability unless it's certain people. It's a lot of and that's the other thing is when people don't want personal responsibility unless it's for themselves, but it's for everyone else. Okay, and it's not all of those ideas that they have are just completely unbiblical, and so again, that's when a person that says they're Christian and they're okay with a lot of that stuff, they don't know God. They can't.
No, that's just something they say.
It's just like a thing you say, oh, if I just say I'm a Christian, then I am. It's like that's just not how that works.
I mean, what are you Biden?
Well, that's exactly. I mean,
but I think so. I've got another one. Why people would turn their back on God? They don't want to be told what to do.
Oh, that's
so they just plain old don't.
Right.
Plain old don't. And a lot of people, you look at some of those rallies that you were talking about too, and they'll say, you'll get the Christian preachers go and say, why don't you? No one's telling me what to do. Why should I listen to someone I can't see or someone I can't hear? No, the only person that tells me what to do is me. That's another big one, I think, especially this day and age where the religion itself is so big. No one's going to tell me what to do because I tell myself what to do. I make my own luck. I make my own job. I make my own everything. Everything that's been done is because of me, not because of anybody else or anything else. So I think that's another reason that people would those people have believed in God at one point or another? That's a hard thing to say, yes or no. But the reason they don't now is because they don't want to be told what to do. They want to have full control over their lives without anybody else or any godly figure of any kind, whatever they might say, has any belief whatsoever. They have any belief in whatsoever. So I think that's a big one too.
Oh, it is. Yeah, no, you're spot on, which is such a deceptive thought because when you realize how little control you have over your own life in general,
Right.
it's quite, well, ironically enough, it's quite humbling because you have almost no control. Because, like you said, a job, for example, like, oh, I'm going to make my own job, or whatever, you still had to have help from a person to say, oh, I like your resume. And the person had to like you in the interview. They had to pull the trigger on hiring
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
We all need help. We can't really do much for ourselves. Like, no matter what you're doing, like, I mean, you can get real crazy with it. Like, if the nearest grocery store is 10 miles and say the only way to get there is you drive your car, well, you had help from the guy that built the car for you.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's so, like, it's all intertwined. I mean, we're all helpless in a certain regard. We don't create things for ourselves. Like, yes, we have our little teeny, and I emphasize teeny, tiny sliver of the pie of things we did. Like, the Bible talks about good work and work in general. Like, if I don't have a job, my work is to apply for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I can go there in the interview. Outside of that, I'm totally helpless.
Right.
I'm totally helpless. I can't control what potential employers think of my resume or what they think about me or the questions they're going to ask me or the wage they're going to offer me or if they're even hiring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't control that. So it's really ultimately what it comes down to is what you're saying is it's the ultimate in pride, but what you can the phrase you can use now is narcissism. It's the same thing. It's just narcissism is like pride on display, like almost like it's pride on display where you're almost like proud of it, right? Like, but it's saying that, oh, I'll do this, I'll do that. It's like, no, we all have help all the time, and you can't control it. You're even going to wake up in the morning,
and
you
you're
can't
put
even
in these
control your own.
situations. You're put in these situations not because of what you did, but because God's putting you in these situations.
Well, exactly.
If you were to get a job tomorrow, it's because you Dan told me a story, and I don't know if you told it on the show or not, but you're working a part-time job now that you had an enlightenment at 3 a.m. and you woke up. Was that because you woke yourself up at 3 a.m. to call these people and say, hey, I remember you offered me a job. Can I have it? No, you woke up at 3 a.m. because God woke you up at 3 a.m, reminded you of something you had forgot about for 6 months. Call them. You're there the next day working. Was that because of you? Was that all you? Boy, man, you're good. Can you help me out with some of that stuff?
Yeah, it's all me, man. And,
yeah, way to go.
I even somehow manipulated my boss's mind to say, yes, take Dan in. Like, I mean, it's just like people want to feel so like important. Like, I did this, I did this, I did this. It's like, even, we don't give ourselves the ability to speak. We don't give ourselves the ability to have talents or skills. We don't give ourselves the ability to understand. We don't give ourselves the ability to learn. We don't give ourselves the ability to walk. We don't give ourselves the ability to see. Your organs are doing what they're supposed to, but you're not doing that. Are you controlling your lungs and your heart and your digestive system?
Don't even think about it during the day.
No, we have no control over it.
None.
Right? Like, it's almost like the whole thing might actually be some sort of design. It's really weird.
It's like when
you know,
somebody's
because
really good at something, like you. I've told you, and Dad's told you this too, where Dan can just pick up a bat and play baseball or softball, and he'll hit just as good as he did 3 years ago. Why is that? Three words: God given talent. It's not Dan given
no,
talent.
I'm lazy
It's
as heck with it.
God given talent because Dan has a certain talent. I mean, you guys have seen what he does with the masks and stuff, and all the things he's doing. He's even doing that on a larger scale now. That's God given talent. Sure, he learned and he taught himself, but what do you think made him have that drive, and what do you think gave him that confidence to do that? It wasn't he didn't wake up one day and say, "Hey, I'm going to be a really good sculptor and painter." No, he has God-given talent. Talent that you can't explain.
Right.
Talent that's to some people unnatural because to me, I mean, I could never do that because I don't have the talents in that area.
Well, yeah, because
God-given talent.
it's certainly, yeah, none of my skills are me or talent. Because if they were you, then everybody could have then everyone
Well,
could have the same
everybody could
skills.
do it. Right.
Yeah, like
Right.
there would be no distinction between people, and we could all learn the same things and do the same things. And that's the other thing is like we're not robots. Like there's only
Right.
one of you, there's only one of me, there's only
Right.
one of every human being that's ever lived and ever will live. And um, so, and just the narcissism and thinking that someone did everything themselves or they have all the answers to literally everything in their own life. You know, that means you've never had to ask for help from anybody.
Right.
You've never made a mistake. You've never sinned. You've never had to change anything. I mean, it's just it's such a delusion that the enemy puts on people. It's
Yeah.
like in it from a biblical standpoint, it's a veil where it's literally blinding. God will put a veil on these people because where their heart is, where they literally can't see the truth. I mean, literally, like that doesn't mean they can't look up and say, well, I can see that, or look down and say that the grass is green. Like yeah, that's true. It's green, or the sky is blue, but they don't have truth as far as God goes, as far as being humble, as far as things like that. And it's wild to think about it. And it's just, I could go on and on, but, and you can't reason with that.
No.
And the ultimate thing to trigger a person like that would be to question them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an unfortunate delusion. And we've all had delusions before where we think we're higher and more powerful and better than we are. But to your point, that the ultimate thing that God asked you to do is what he did in the flesh, what Christ did, is to humble yourself.
Yeah.
That right there, people want no part of that. They don't want to think of others they don't want to think of others as higher than themselves, as the Bible says. They don't want to do the first two, or the two greatest commandments, like worship God and love God with your whole heart, mind, and soul, and then love your neighbor as yourself. They want to worship themselves and love themselves.
Right.
And it's survival of the fittest and dog eat dog and roll over the little guy or push this guy out of the way. It's like I get what I want. Like it's just
Yeah. And that's so rampant like in society now. It's like any little thing to screw the other guy. It's like
yeah.
you see all this stuff now where it's like, oh, we're gonna charge you. It's like I was looking at a hotel where they opened a new hotel that's got a water park in it. Okay, well the water park comes with the hotel if you're at it, so it's like $179. Well, no, we have a service fee of $75 added on top of that. Why? To screw
There.
the you're already there. It's like, it's just everything. Everything's like, with all the tipping crap. I'm going to tip you for something I could have done. You pushed a button. It's just all this stuff and all this narcissistic stuff where it's like, it's all about the way society kind of goes now. It's about screwing each other. I'm going to
Well,
get something out of you, whether I did something good or not, because I deserve it.
well, exactly. And here's the distinction, though. What you're saying is right on, because the distinction is that you can go. There's two ways you can go. Those people you're talking about are trying to find the value in themselves. and the value of their life is in themselves. A Christian, our value is not found in ourselves, but our value is found in God.
Right.
He gives us our value. Those people are trying to give themselves their value. And so therefore, to give themselves that value, they have to steamroll anyone or anything they can, or elevate themselves, or hold others accountable, but they themselves can't be held accountable because that diminishes them.
Right.
Any flaw that you may see, they can't have that. There are no flaws in their mind because that's diminishing them. They have to elevate themselves to give themselves some sort of value. But a Christian doesn't do that. A Christian, ideally, it's not easy, but we are to humble ourselves. And the Bible says, humble yourselves. Like, we have the ability to humble ourselves. And we don't have to elevate ourselves. God's already elevated us. He makes us good. He makes us righteous. The other people elevate themselves to make themselves good, to make themselves righteous. Well, they can't. Everyone falls short of the glory of God. No one is righteous or good without Christ. Christ makes us good. Right. I'm not good. The only goodness in me is because what God has put there. It's his goodness that's in me. And so you see the distinction. Like, they're opposite ends of the spectrum. Yeah. That's why a lot of people that don't know God will do all these acts, and they have to tell the world about it. Well, look at the car I'm driving. It's so good for the environment. I care about the environment. I'm not saying that that's evil per se, but they're doing it out of a specific motivation of the heart to show everyone that they're good. That makes, or I donate to animal shelters, so I'm a good person. It's all to project to the world I'm good because of what I'm doing, which in actuality, there's a lot of people that think they're good because they donate to Planned Parenthood, which murders children. So good and bad in the world gets completely skewed based on the individual. What one person in the world thinks is good, another person thinks is bad. Right. So it's a roller coaster. So what's the truth there? Well, that's where God comes in. He's the truth. And so for a Christian, it's black and white. It's this is good because God says so. This is bad because God says so. And I'm going to listen to him, not myself, not the world. There's your distinction. It's very different. Yeah. But a lot of people don't want to give up their power or what they think power they have. We don't really have it.
It's about control. They want to have full control. They want to be the driver, and I think that's where a lot of it lies too. It's like, I don't want to give up. I don't want to be the passenger. You've seen those little memes where it says, the minute I start following Jesus, then he's got the wheel and you're on the back on the skis holding on. So that's what, and that's a hard thing to do, man. I get it. It's I'm kind of a control freak myself. It's hard to give up control. It's hard to give up certain things that you think you can handle on your own without anybody's help. That's hard to do.
Yeah. Well,
but you're probably not going to work it out if you do that.
Well, no, because we're flawed, and whether people want to admit it or not, we're sinful, fallen, flawed creatures that have a selfish, emotional human nature, and emotions are temporary. And so when our decision making is based off of those, it's generally wrong. Yeah. And if you ever justify in your mind that it's okay to hurt someone to benefit yourself, it's like, well, you're wrong. And that goes for me and you too. And then you'll have to say, well, that's being, Christians are just judgmental. This whole talk you two are having is judgmental. It's just simply not. Because I'm my own worst critic. I'm my own harshest judge, if you will, to a fault. We all need conviction. We all need help. We all need to realize our error and realize our sins and realize our mistakes. And thank God for that. Thank God for conviction. When I do something stupid and right away the Holy Spirit's like, real gentle, like, that's, no, you know the truth in that. Like, right. Then it's not screaming at you, you're going to hell, you lost your salvation because of a sin. Well, that's not how it works. Right. We're not better as Christians. We're not better than non-Christians. We're not high and mighty because, again, we didn't do it. I don't have salvation because it's something I did. It's nothing I did. It's everything that Christ did. So I'm no better. I'm just aware of how bad and evil and rotten I am compared to people that think how wonderful and righteous and good that they are, they think. That's the difference. So
Well, and you don't want that to, like what you said is good too, because I think maybe some people also might feel that way to the extent where they're like, well, I'm so bad, I'm so evil, I'm so rotten, I'm never going to do any better, so why do it anymore? Just let it all go, just give in, just I'll do what I want. I'm going to go to hell anyway, so I might as well just roll with the punches and let it go. I could see that being a thing too.
oh well, it is, and because they're ultimately people try to find the satisfaction in life in the things that they do or the material things that they have, or their title, maybe a job
Mhm.
title or how fancy their house is or whatever, but they never get there. They still have like that emptiness, like that depression that's beyond depression, right? Like they're trying everything, and nothing ever works. Like there's always that emptiness. It's because you can't fill the void in your life. You can't do
Yeah.
it because this world don't have much to offer. That now.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so do I. Like the older you get, ideally, um, and like you said earlier, like 1 minute to next, you're not going to be perfect because, as Apostle Paul says, life's not a sprint; it's a long race. Like you ideally you would be growing and getting closer to God and more Christ-like all the way to your last breath. Whether
Yeah.
it's when you're, God forbid, 20 or 30 years old or 100 years old, uh, that's the whole thing. I mean, you're ideally growing that whole time, and you're getting closer to God. And then you realize more and more as you're doing that how worthless most things are.
Yeah.
God and people are what truly matters in that order, in that order. And everything else is just a blink of an eye. It's just material. I mean, people want to put so much emphasis on things like their own power or themselves or their money or their job or whatever. They always talk about like you don't see a hearse towing a U-Haul. I mean, you
Right.
don't.
No, you don't.
You don't. And everyone agrees with that, but some people can't connect
Can't
the
let go of
dots
it.
there.
Hmm.
They agree with that, but they will still live life for themselves and things. You don't live life for yourself. The old self dies. The old person that you were before you knew Christ that would lived for themselves, he's dead, and then you live for Christ. You don't live for
Right.
yourself. That's humbling yourself.
Yeah.
People want no part of that
Yeah.
oftentimes.
They give up the control. You lose control if you do that.
Well, and the ironic thing about that is like the control that they want so desperately. Typically they're most angry, miserable, sad, lonely people, and those things aren't working, but yet they cling to it. It's very fascinating, and it's
Yeah.
an unfortunate thing. It's just that deception that the devil has, and just
Yep. Yep. Yep.
we just get this thing. It'll be
No, it doesn't. It does because you're gonna want the next thing and the next thing.
yeah, fun for a little while. New car's
Right.
fun for a couple weeks. Then
Yep.
you get the first,
You get the
inclination.
first bill and you're like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, I think we pretty much hit this one where we wanted to. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I mean, not really. It's just it's it's obviously a very like with all of God's word, it's so deep, and I mean, you could keep digging and digging and digging, honestly. Um, but you know, it's always. I guess the last thing I'd say is like when people look up to say like the celebrity of the athlete, like
Oh,
those are
don't do
people
that.
that have
Don't do that.
everything.
Yeah.
Well, those people have everything, these, and they have all the money and fame and notoriety and all this, but as I've said before, so many of them, their lives are extraordinarily tragic, whether it's drug
Right.
use or alcoholism, or and many of them commit suicide. So if those things weren't enough, then what is?
I never really believed in idolizing people. I think that's a mistake to
No,
because most of the
it is.
people that you're idolizing are some of the, the worst
But
ones.
well, right,
It's like,
right.
if my daughter said I idolize Taylor Swift, I'd flip out completely because holy crap. Hey, if I
No.
don't get a Taylor Swift dig in at least one episode, I'm not doing my job here. So
Oh, yeah, Chris is a hypocrite. He said he's a Christian and he made fun of somebody. He's not a Christian.
Not making fun of anybody. I'm just saying, it's not an idol.
Well, it's just funny how Christians are held to such a high standard, but people can't hold.
But nobody else is. Well, that's the other
for
thing that drives me
themselves.
nuts. Like, I don't have to. If I'm not a Christian, I have to have no standard. I can be a rotten piece of what. But if you're Christian, you have to be up here. That argument goes all the time on Facebook. Well, you Christians wanted Trump in, so how you feeling now? Feeling good. How you feeling?
Well, there's a standard only appears when it's pertaining to someone or something else.
That's another weapon of the devil is to criticize the people who believe in God because he doesn't like that. So what he'll do is he'll be like, to the non-believer, oh well, look at them, see they're hypocrites. Go call them. That's what he'll do. So that's why it's so easy for them to do that. And with that, I've learned it's stupid to get in a fight on Facebook with some idiot who doesn't know what they're talking about over Taylor Swift or over
you're
politics.
Not going to convince people,
right?
And the thing is, the idea of like a hypocrite, like everyone's hypocritical at times.
Oh yeah.
Like we are obviously joking around, but it's like when someone will just call out Christians specifically for being hypocrites, it's like, that's silly. Because there are people out there that only want to call out everyone else's flaws, but they'll never call out their own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to call us out, but you were willing to vote for somebody who had no policy and no plan and no idea what they were doing.
Well, that vote was strictly out of hatred for the other candidate, which
which is a whole other slew of problems you have.
Well, that's never okay to. Well, and that's another thing. It's selective, where you only hate people. You shouldn't hate. Oh, this guy hates this group of people, but then that person hates this person. It's okay then.
Yeah.
Well, I hate him for this reason, so hatred's suddenly okay. It's like that's Right. Anyway.
Right. All right. Well, there you go. That's our take on that. So going into that, I was kind of thinking, we could talk about this more later, but I was kind of thinking it would be fun to go over what Trump has done in the last month, and we could talk about that, and we can go over if obviously we're probably going to agree with most of it.
But I think that's good because a lot of people are mad about some of the stuff, but they were
I would kind of like to clarify some of it.
Well, they were okay when Obama specifically did a lot of these same things, such as the deportation.
Yeah. So maybe we'll do that next week. Maybe we'll go on some of the stuff that Trump has done because he's done a lot. I mean, geez, I think that's another reason that's got people so shell shocked is he's done more in a month than Biden did in 4 years. So it's like people are like, oh, wait a sec. This is how it's supposed to be. You're actually supposed to do things. Now, I will admit, I don't agree with everything he's done. Not everything. So, that would be a good topic of conversation to where we can see where we differ on that. So,
yep. Sounds
so
good
if you don't like politics, don't watch next week. Don't make a hour and 8-minute long live stream and tell us that YouTube's for everyone and bitch and cry about it and make yourself look stupid. Don't do that. Just don't watch. It's easy. If you don't like politics, don't watch next week. It's cake. Don't be a little...
Seems simple enough.
Don't be a shill and agree with all the bad stuff because you agree with us. You know what a shill is, Dan? A shill is someone who agrees with everything, no matter if it's good or bad. Don't be a shill. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
All right. Well, we will see you guys next week. Have a good one.